So, next, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, one of the leaders we also share the kind of insight with is our final keynote speaker of the summit, Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie. And Mayor Crombie she was elected in 2014 and has prioritized building regional integrated transit. She champions a vision for Mississauga where mobility is available to everyone, regardless of where they live in the city. And she's also quite a champion of our second largest concentration of employment, the Airport Employment Center. So I want to extend a warm thank you to Mayor Crombie for Mayor Crombie, and over to you, Mayor Crombie.
Well, thank you, Marcy, for that very kind introduction. And I'm really happy to be with you here today. And I'd like to acknowledge the incredible work that the Toronto Region Board of Trade is doing under the leadership of Jan De Silva in helping our economic recovery, as well as the entire team at TRBOT for hosting this very important summit. I'd also like to acknowledge my provincial colleagues who spoke earlier today, including the Transportation Minister, Caroline Mulrooney, and Infrastructure Minister, Kinga Surma. Achieving regionally integrated, efficient, and customer-friendly public transit systems is only possible through strong partnerships between all orders of government. And I'm grateful that we do have strong partners in the Government of Ontario and the Government of Canada. I'm here today, of course, to talk about transit in Mississauga. And I believe Mississauga serves as an important case study in how a suburban municipality, long known as a sprawling bedroom community to Toronto, has embraced public transit. And I'm going to divide my remarks into two sections. First, what we've achieved so far in Mississauga in building a strong, locally integrated transit system. And second, some of the key projects and policy changes that I believe are needed to not only secure Mississauga's future, but that of the entire region. And that will provide residents with world-class transit options. It'll also reduce congestion, and most importantly, also help us reach our climate action goals. So for the first 40 years of our 48-year history, Mississauga's growth was primarily focused on low-density residential development. We offered the suburban dream to those workers commuting to Toronto for work each and every day. The street was built with wide boulevards to make travel a breeze. In fact, we have 5,600 kilometers of roadways in Mississauga. The problem with this type of development is that it does not at all promote transit, and it is not overly supportive of public transit either. Our winding subdivisions and our cul-de-sacs do not allow for efficient or convenient public transit. It's also more costly to operate, both in terms of cost and in terms of impact on the climate. When gas is cheap and roads are plenty, and your destination will not allow you to walk to get there, it's far easier to use your car. While we've made a lot of progress, our modal split in Mississauga just prior to the pandemic was 88 to 12% in favor of the car. In Mississauga, the car remains king, but that is changing. And I've made it my mandate to change that. In the last 7 years, we have increased transit service by 300,000 service hours, 300,000. And we now have over 50 million riders on our transit system each year. Of course, these are pre-COVID, pre-pandemic numbers, as the pandemic has drastically cut ridership in Mississauga, as well as it has everywhere else. But I'll touch on that a bit later. We're streamlining our routes through a 5-year strategy to be more efficient and be more effective as well. And we're working towards a more transit-oriented development right across our city. The reality is that there's no longer enough space in Mississauga to focus on building single-family detached homes. We've embraced density and intensification out of necessity, and our development plans have become more focused on major transit areas and nodes to bring people to transit and bring transit to people. And that includes Uptown out here, Ontario and Eglinton, our downtown city center, as well as our waterfront, which will soon be home to two new transformative communities, Brightwater and Lakeview Village. It makes no sense to build where there is no transit or where it will ever be. We have about 65 major transit stations areas in Mississauga with a lot of untapped potential for live-work communities served by local and rapid transit. Before the pandemic, more people came to Mississauga from neighboring cities to work each day than who left Mississauga to work elsewhere. And that's over 230,000, almost 250,000 people. We know that we need to make it easy and appealing for people to connect to MyWay, our transit system, from the TTC and Go Transit and the Brampton Zoom as well. To achieve this, we continue to introduce more express routes that connect riders to and from major regional transit nodes and large employment areas, such as we discussed, the airport business park and the Meadowvale corporate business park as well. Our project is to retrofit suburbia, which is no easy task. We continue to strongly advocate to our partners in other orders of government to build the infrastructure that we need to accelerate this shift. I'm proud to say that we have been successful, and it's in large part because of our government partners who share our vision. We've secured $4.6 billion in funding from the province to build the Hurontario LRT that will form the north-south spine of a regionally integrated transit system, connecting with two GO lines and our existing transitway, which is our BRT that runs parallel to the 403 along near Eglinton. It's truly hard to underscore just how transformative this 18-kilometer, 19-stop project is and how critical it is to the future economic prosperity of our city. This new LRT line will move 32 million people each year, and when complete, 25% of all residential and employment will be located within 500 meters of this corridor. The recently announced Eglinton Crosstown extension from Mount Dennis to Renforth will link the Eglinton LRT with our 18-kilometer transitway. That should be the Hurontario LRT, I apologize, to our 18-kilometer transitway. Our hope is that one day the crosstown will be extended to our airport corporate center, seamlessly linking riders from across the GTHA to the second largest employment zone in the entire region. Last year, we also announced full funding for the Lakeshore BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, a long-awaited project that will also connect to the Hurontario LRT and will be critical to moving people along the Lakeshore corridor. We're hopeful that our provincial and our federal partners will soon fund the Dundas BRT, a 48-kilometer stretch along Dundas Street from the Kipling Transit Hub in Toronto to Highway 6 in Hamilton, including approximately 17 kilometers right through the city of Mississauga. I want to once again thank my provincial and federal colleagues for being true partners and understanding the need to modernize transit in Mississauga. These game-changing projects wouldn't be possible without their financial support. I'm proud of the transit network we are building and the work that is being done that will change our city. The reality is that we're embracing transit to also achieve our climate change goals. In 2019, our city passed our first ever climate change action plan with a target of 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. It's an ambitious plan, especially for a city the size of Mississauga, but we feel it's doable. And we've declared a climate change emergency and allocated, are you ready? $450 million over the next 10 years to implement the plan. And I'm proud of the work that we've already done to expand our transit fleet and our service hours, reducing 58,000 tons of CO2 and taking almost 12,000 cars off the road. But, of course, much more needs to be done. One of the largest drivers of emission is our transit fleet. Our plan has many bold commitments to green our fleet and make it smarter. And by 2024, we will replace 43% of our vehicles We have fast-tracked funding to purchase 11 hybrid buses, and we plan on purchasing an additional 444 new second-generation hybrid electric buses to replace our aging fleet. These buses have an operating lifespan of about 18 years and will help us achieve up to 25% fuel savings. They can also be converted at their midlife cycle to clean technology, either hydrogen or battery electric. So this is where Mississauga is in our transit journey so far. And the big question is, now the second part of my speech, where do we go from here? In some ways, the answer is simple: continuing to push forward on projects and policies to expand our local transit system and to integrate into the larger regional transit system. But as we do that, we have to be cognizant of a few realities. First, Mississauga, like all municipalities, is facing a huge financial hardship, largely because of the reduction in our transit ridership. Last year, we faced a $64.5 million budget deficit, which was only offset thanks to Safe Restart funding by the provincial and the federal governments. This year, we are facing continued financial pressures, and we will undoubtedly need our government partners to work with municipalities to provide Safe Restart funding once again for 2022 and to develop new revenue tools to ensure that cities can fulfill their responsibilities to invest in a higher quality of life for one and all. And as we look towards recovery, we also need to make even bolder investments to get people back on public transit. Investments that can match up with the changing nature of work and the demographics of the region. No longer can the prime focus of regional transit be getting people in and out of downtown Toronto. Sorry, folks. I want to thank the provincial government for recently taking further steps to help connect riders to Mississauga and Mississaugans to the rest of the GTA. The new Kipling Transit Hub that I mentioned earlier will link 16 of our bus routes to Kipling Station, making it so much easier for residents to link to the TTC and people coming from Toronto to link to our MyWay bus transit. But I'm encouraging all levels of government to go even further. In its report, Erasing the Invisible Line, the Toronto Region Board of Trade calls for the creation of a Toronto Transit Federation to help integrate public transit across the entire region, with fare integration as a central component. Each city would retain autonomy over their transit systems, but public transit users would pay only a single fare if traveling within two zones, which generally align with each municipality. This level of integration needs to be our overreaching goal. And while it may take some time to get there, we can take some small steps right now with the support of our government partners. Mississauga's MyWay system already has fare integration with Brampton Zoom and a co-fare agreement with Go Transit. One of our biggest hurdles is integration with the TTC. And when the Eglinton Crosstown opens, for example, and people transfer onto a MyWay bus, they will have to pay a MyWay fare on top of what they've already paid on the Eglinton Crosstown. This is punitive, especially for people picking up the Crosstown in Etobicoke for only a short journey into eastern Mississauga or into our downtown core. Municipalities don't have the fiscal firepower to integrate on our own. Our staff have estimated fare integration could cost between $9 and $12 million each year. But the province and the federal government do have the fiscal firepower. Fare integration will help more people get back on transit at a time when we need it the most. It's also critical for our economic recovery, as more people will seek employment opportunities in neighboring regions through the elimination of the double fare. As TR Bot points out, the major beneficiaries of fare integration are disproportionately low-income riders making short, cross-boundary trips between Toronto and the outer suburbs and into the inner 905 areas. So at the end of the day, fare integration is an effective tool to address some really very serious equity issues on our public transit systems. But we know there's a lot more integration than just fare integration. We need the tools to come together as municipalities to remove redundancies right across our systems. When MyWay's Route 76 leaves Mississauga for Kipling Station along Burnhamthorpe, our bus drivers, our transit drivers, are not permitted to pick up residents in Toronto, except for at the station. This means that the TTC has to run buses along the same route that our MyWay buses are already running along. This makes little sense. We have tried to implement a pilot project with Toronto to allow our buses to pick up riders in their borders, but legislative changes at the provincial level are necessary and needed to make this a reality. I also believe that we need to be more aggressively leveraging the existing transit infrastructure the GTHA already has at its disposal to match the shift we're seeing in working patterns and the demographic growth that's happening in areas surrounding Toronto proper. In the Getting on the Right Track, another insightful report by TRBOT, it's noted that the pandemic has led many workers to consider permanently shifting their work partially or fully to their homes, with as many as 25% of commuters not returning to downtown Toronto post-pandemic. We also know that downtown Toronto makes up only 16% of the region's 3.5 million jobs. TRBOT argues that GO should radically shift from traditional commuter service to create the Trillium Regional Rail Network, a bold plan to leverage the numerous rail corridors emanating from Union Station, creating a bi-directional, all-day regional rail service that is fully integrated with local transit. For Mississauga, this approach is key to unlocking our full economic potential. Our single biggest transit priority is all-day two-way service on the Milton GO line. With 6 stops in our city on the Milton GO line, the 3 million riders per year, this is the second busiest corridor in the GO network. There are close to 8,000 businesses employing 143,000 people in Mississauga alone along this line. That's a third of all businesses and employment in Mississauga. But that Milton GO train, it runs the wrong way and not nearly frequently enough. The train runs west to east in the morning and east to west in the evening with just 5 daily trips in each direction. So think about it. Picks up in Mississauga, drops off in Toronto, and at the end of the day, picks up in Toronto, drops off in Mississauga, when we know that the net jobs are in Mississauga. More people need to come to work to Mississauga than leave each and every single day. So the train runs in the wrong direction. If you stand inside the headquarters of Novo Nordisk in Meadowvale, one of our largest pharmaceutical companies, you can see the GO train station, but it's of no use to their employees coming from Toronto. The train doesn't stop in that direction in the morning. And there are hundreds of other businesses in Meadowvale, which is affectionately called Pill Hill, where many of our pharmaceutical companies are based, that are in the same situation. And as mayor, I worry how this is keeping people off public transit. It's also increasing commute times and making it less attractive for businesses to invest in our city. The reality is that the economic potential of the Milton corridor is immense, and all-day two-way GO service on that line will unlock that economic potential. This is the story of how Mississauga has embraced and built a strong local public transit network and our ambitions for the future. And as much as I'm a big advocate for my city, as you can tell, I know that many other municipalities are as eager to expand all-day two-way GO train service in their own cities, on their own corridors, eager to integrate their transit systems more effectively with their neighbors. And if our collective goal is truly to get more people onto public transit, to tackle congestion and reduce carbon emissions, then we need to leverage the existing infrastructure we have in place, while continuing to build new transit infrastructure that links large new developments to the surrounding region, instead of building more highways that put more cars on the road. And if Mississauga and communities across the Toronto region are truly to compete against the Parises, the Londons, the New Yorks, and the Hong Kongs of the world to attract talent and business investment that we need to grow, recover, and to thrive. Then we need an even bolder and more innovative way of creating fully integrated regional transit systems that rival the best in the world. The stakes are too high. We can't afford to be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Jennifer Fries, the Board's Senior Vice President of Business Development. And I did want to start by thanking you again, Mayor Crombie, for your thought-provoking remarks and for being with us today. Something you touched on that was particularly relevant for today's event, and that has come up at several points throughout the day, is the importance of collaboration. In transportation, the more integrated our regional planning is, the better. That's true for charting out public transit routes, for making strategic infrastructure investments, and for reaping the benefits of our collective growth. But it's also true on a relational level. At the Toronto Region Board of Trade, we believe strongly that the key to solving big challenges is getting smart, dedicated people to put their heads together. It's a dynamic I'm keenly aware of as my team and I bring members and partners into our work every day. In fact, it's why the board exists, to help convene the right players at the right time around the issues facing our businesses and cities. When it comes to transportation, you've heard from many of those collaborators today. Partners like SNC-Lavalin, our long-standing summit presenting sponsor, and other leaders in this space, including CN, AECOM, Newport, Cubic, and Alstom. And of course, the board's principal sponsors are always at the heart of these discussions: Scotiabank, the Globe and Mail, the University of Toronto, and, as Jan celebrated this morning, SNC-Lavalin now joins this group as well. By coming together to discuss and learn from each other, we can guide the region to a future we all want to see. And our sessions today painted a picture of what that future could look like. In the morning, for instance, we heard from Minister Surma and Infrastructure Ontario's Michael Lindsay about transit-oriented communities, places where people can work, shop, and get to where they need to without relying on car or spending hours on the road. Then our panels looked at the key enablers for shared success, things like reclaiming our critically important visitor economy, improving public transit across the region, or getting big projects built on time and on budget. We discussed what transportation might look like in the future, given the emergence of new technologies and emphasis on sustainability. And as you just heard from Minister Mulroney and Mayor Crombie, political leaders are increasingly recognizing that big transportation decisions can't be made in isolation from our neighbors. Our economy is regionally connected, so our networks of movement should be as well. It's clear from the quality of our speakers today that there's no shortage of good ideas to draw from to make that future a reality. And I want to thank all of our speakers for sharing their time with us. And most of all, I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us virtually and being a part of the conversation. If you enjoyed today's program, this isn't it. I strongly encourage you to save the date and join us at our Workforce Summit on Tuesday, March 29th. Much like today's event, we'll be bringing together the top thought leaders and decision makers to discuss the hottest issues facing our workforce, ensuring that in today's increasingly competitive battle for attracting and retaining the best talent in the world, our region continues to come out on top. To learn more and register for the Workforce Summit or any of the virtual programming at the board, you can visit thought.com/events. Until then, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you again soon.